トビデオ
I've been at this for a long time. It doesn't feel long, but time makes fools of us all. And over time, I have noticed a couple of shifts in how certain old school anime properties have been perceived by the otaku collective. Namely, the collection of anime that I have long dubbed the violence canon. The products of the bubble era economy where animators and distributors use the newfound home video market as a playground to get their most evil and exploitative ideas onto TV screens and into our hearts. For the longest time, people have always considered anime of this era to be a shameful history, works that relied on shock, gore, and tits to move tapes, consigned to the dustbin of history as the medium figuratively matured. But I've noticed a lot of younger retro anime fans finding affection towards these titles. Instead of deriding anime like MD Geist and Genocyber, they see them as cult classics. And even though a lot of the older crowd are not happy with this cultural development, I am not one of those. Even if I was critical of Genocyber in my review and still stand by my thoughts, I can see where people find affection for it, because anime with this amount of sex and violence hardly ever gets made anymore. As anime has gone from niche otaku interest to global industry buoyed by companies like Netflix, anime with this level of explicit content is rare, which in turn has made anime sold on this material much more valuable. But even if we can see tawdry blood and guts anime as art, that doesn't mean we can no longer critique them as art. To this end, Kazuo Koike. Koike-sama is one of our late old masters, but you probably wouldn't have gotten that from the works of his that received anime adaptations. Mad Bull 34, his take on the gritty New York cop story, is a loud, boorish anime filled with mid-tier animated violence and misogyny that is only saved by the camp factor.
I had a feeling this evening might end up like this, so I used these grenades for a jockstrap.
Hanape Bazooka, his collaboration with other manga legend Go Nagai, is a juvenile sex romp that hopes that the promise of constant nudity is enough to distract you from the fact that this advertised comedy anime isn't funny. And of course, Wounded Man, an OVA so irredeemably bad that not even the most desperate licensors chose to send it to America back in the day. This anime's very existence is a black eye to the credibility of all involved. So we have to ask, has there ever been a good anime based off of Koike's work? We're talking about the guy behind Lone Wolf and Cub here. He is most certainly not the hack his adaptations would lead us to believe. There's gotta be at least one anime that shows us his talent as a storyteller. Does such an anime even exist? Well, maybe?
But in this human world, there is no one who is truly free. Become a dragon, Freeman. Let your ambitions soar, and if you survive, your place in heaven will be assured.
Painter Emu Hino is celebrating her 29th birthday home alone. She finds herself reflecting on where her life has led her to get to this point. The reason for this is because she believes that this birthday is most likely going to be her last, as she is expecting to be killed soon. That is because she is the sole witness to a murder done by one of the most dangerous assassins in the global criminal underworld, a member of the powerful 108 Dragons Triad. The man with the dragon tattoo, the killer who silently sheds tears for his victims as they bleed out beneath his feet. Crying Freeman.
They were different somehow. They were filled with sorrow, and yet terribly beautiful.
Freeman was formerly Yo Hinomura, a humble Japanese potter, but during an exhibition in New York City, he came in possession of incriminating evidence hidden in one of his ceramics. Before he can report it to the police though, the 108 Dragons agents kidnap him and, through the power of acupuncture, brainwash him into becoming their principal assassin. He is given the codename Freeman, as he longs to be a free man, and the silent crying he does is for the remembrance of his past as a normal man at the moment of his kills.
Do you want to be free, Freeman? Freeman, that would be your codename, my boy. Since you want to be free so badly, that name will have great meaning for you.
Hino knows of his reputation and knows that he will eventually have to kill her to cover his tracks. But before he does, she hopes that he will grant her one last request, to ensure she does not die a 29-year-old virgin.
If I must be killed, I want him to do it.
And if you think such a plot is absurd, we are not even scratching the surface of the madness that 1988's Crying Freeman has in store for us. Toei's ambitious 6-part OVA film adaptation of the Koike manga of the same name, with all the trappings in store. An adaptation that seems to have been quietly forgotten by all parties. But once upon a time, Crying Freeman probably rivaled Lone Wolf and Cub as the standout piece in Kazuo Koike's repertoire. It was a beast of a manga that was popular not just in Japan, but all across Asia. It inspired not one, but 2 Hong Kong films that loosely adapted its story. John Woo's The Killer is said to have been heavily influenced by this manga, and it even netted itself a straightforward French-Canadian film adaptation starring Iron Chef chairman Mark Dacascos and Mako, and directed by Christophe Gans, yes, the Silent Hill guy, that has supposedly netted a powerful cult following. Even the anime was a big-name property here for a while in the Stone Age of American otaku fandom. It was one of Streamline Pictures' flagship titles that sold itself on being an animated movie with lots of blood and lots of breasts, which was the style at the time.
State-of-the-art Japanese animation.
But now, the Crying Freeman anime's legacy is practically nil. When you look for Crying Freeman on the internet, you're going to get pointed into the direction of the Christophe Gans movie, not the original Koike manga, and certainly not the anime adaptation of it. Mad Bull 34 has a far more lasting impact on the current anime culture, which is odd because Freeman is just as insane as that title, perhaps even more so.
Oh, Jesus, that was better than sex! Oh, God!
And lucky for us, our pals at Discotek have gifted the world a gorgeous Blu-ray remaster of the Crying Freeman anime, so now we have no excuse. Could Crying Freeman be an example of a good Koike adaptation, or is it just gonna leave us all in tears of laughter?
Fuck off and die!
Now, it has come to my attention that I have done 3 videos on Kazuo Koike's work and have not done a proper bio on him. So why don't we fix that? Born Yuzuru Tawaraya in what is now Daisen, Japan on May 8, 1936, Koike's childhood was a rough one defined by both the war and the ensuing post-war austerity afterwards. One of his favorite childhood activities was going into bookstores, reading manga off the shelves without buying, and then returning to the schoolyard to act out the stories. In 1959, he dropped out of law school after failing the legal exam 3 times. Koike would spend the rest of his 20s floating from job to job, from working at a mahjong parlor, crewing on an overseas freighter, working for the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, and doing groundskeeping at a golf course, all while still reading manga. One day, in 1968, the 32-year-old Koike decided to finally submit a spec script to Takao Saito's production house. Saito, having become the star of Gekiga with his Golgo 13 manga, was looking for assistance to help write adult stories for readers like Koike, who had grown up, but didn't want to leave manga behind. Koike was accepted, and from there, he learned the ropes of storytelling through helping Saito. At the dawn of the 70s, Koike decided that it was time for him to go independent, and soon formed the small collective Studio Ship, later to be known as the Koike Salon. It was here that he and artist Goseki Kojima made the legendary manga Lone Wolf and Cub, the tale of a vengeance-seeking samurai who wanders Japan in search of his wife's murderers, with his young son in tow. But it was also here he would encounter a man named Ryoichi Ikegami. Born on May 29, 1944 in Takefu, Japan, Ikegami got an early start in the world of manga. breaking into the field shortly after graduating junior high while working as a billboard sign painter to support himself. In 1966, he published a story in the monthly anthology Gekiga magazine Garo, which ended up catching the eye of legendary mangaka Shigeru Mizuki. Mizuki immediately sent him a job offer to become an assistant, and Ikegami's career took off like a bullet. From the 70s onward, Ryoichi Ikegami was a heavily in-demand artist for manga creators, and it's not hard to see why. His art style is tailor-made for serious, intense seinen and shonen stories. He credits this style to his influences that range from avant-garde manga author Yoshihiro Sugi to the American artists of the Bronze Age of comics like Neil Adams, which isn't surprising to know that one of his first gigs was the official Spider-Man manga. It's an art style steeped in realism, yet it's a very stylish and flattering realism, where the characters feel more at home in paintings or movie posters than they do in sequential storytelling. But that's how Ikegami likes to tell his stories, through the visual medium. In his words, he likes to use realistic art to tell unrealistic stories, to make the audience think the impossible is possible. It is said by historians that Ikegami truly developed this style in his works with Kazuo Koike. He and Koike's first collaboration came in 1973 with the action manga Aiweo Boy. Published in a general interest magazine, the manga tells the tried and true story of a man, Takeo, driven into tearful revenge after the sudden death of his fiancée, Miki. In case you haven't caught on yet, Koike really loves revenge stories. With its unflinching portrayal of hardcore violence and lurid sexuality, Aiweo Boy was incredibly popular among the salarymen of the age. It even impressed the editors of Weekly Shonen Sunday enough that it netted Ikegami a second job doing the art for Tetsukariya's delinquent manga Otokogumi. Aiweo Boy wrapped in 1977, but 4 years later, Koike and Ikegami found each other again and decided to do another project. It was similar to Aiweo Boy, a man on a quest for revenge, diving deeper and deeper into the conspiracy that follows him like a shadow, and the women who get involved with him meeting grisly demises. I am of course talking about Wounded Man. I'm not going to do any postscript on that story. I'm sure my thoughts on that one have come in loud and clear. All you need to know is that apparently it was enough of a hit to run for 5 years and net itself a 5-episode OVA in the format's early days. A crappy looking OVA, but an OVA nonetheless. And when Wounded Man ended in 1986, I can only imagine that both men turned to each other and asked, "Wanna do it again?" Enter Crying Freeman. While it didn't last as long as the previous 2 titles with only 2 years under its belt, Crying Freeman is undoubtedly the title that has lasted the longest in the culture. Most of this is credited to Ikegami's art, which many consider to be at the absolute peak of his creative ability. But I think it also has to do with it being one of the first manga Viz brought over and localized in the United States. Ikegami's art was closer to the Western style of comics than most manga, which is why this and his previous work, Mai the Psychic Girl, were some of the first manga to appear on the shelves of American comic book stores in the late 80s. And you can tell that Crying Freeman was a huge success in its home country because, just like its predecessor, it netted itself an OVA series the same year the manga wrapped up. But unlike Wounded Man, which was produced by low-budget anime mill Magic Bus, Crying Freeman would fall into the hands of a studio with much deeper pockets, Toei Animation. The production history of this anime hasn't been placed on any public record I can find, but something tells me that this wasn't your average OVA production. I don't know if it was the plan from the start to adapt the entire manga in separate volumes, or if they planned for an adaptation of the first art to be a one and done, and then it got so popular that they had no choice but to keep going. Whatever the case, this OVA adaptation had a massive production time of 6 years to get finished, and while there have been other properties with even lengthier production times and messed up structures, I don't think anything shows a drastic shift in style and design from the first installment to the last installment like Crying Freeman. This production went through 5 whole directors, 5 animation directors, 4 character designers, 3 screenwriters, 3 art directors, and a last-minute sponsorship from Sega to get finished. And you know what? I think it was ultimately worth it in the end.
Excellent. Excellent.
The tallest order Toei had to deal with when adapting Crying Freeman is how exactly do you get Ryoichi Ikegami's art to look good in animation? It's a style clearly meant for the graphic novel format. Plus, Magic Bus did try to adapt the style to the moving image, and it wasn't pretty. Thankfully, Toei Animation has a lot more resources in its war room, so throughout the 6-volume run of the Crying Freeman OVA, it can bring us Ikegami's style in motion with that extra flair. An element we can better appreciate now thanks to Discotech allowing us to not have to watch those faded prints anymore. And since the central appeal of Crying Freeman is hard violent action set pieces, you bet your bottom dollar every one of those scenes are visual feasts for the eyes. At least once per episode, the animation opens up so we can get action that feels straight out of a Golden Harvest film, most of which we can thank to talented animators like Koichi Arai. Junichi Hayama, and especially Mamoru Hosoda. The character designs are also a point of praise here. Ikegami's style may not have been made to be translated directly into anime, but Toei really does give it the good old college try, really leaning into stylish realism, lovingly rendered human bodies engaging in actions that are incredibly human to incredibly superhuman, having the characters come off more like actors in a film than animated characters. They even nail Ikegami's shading techniques by using liberal cross-hatching in a way you don't normally see in anime. The character designs also come with a drawback though. While the designs work in motion, you really do feel their inherent stiffness whenever we have scenes with heavy dialogue and only their mouths are moving, making them less like actors in a film and more like the Hall of Presidents. And when the classic budget saving techniques have to be pulled out of the hats, you are very aware that you are watching animated cells slide across the screen. And while we're on the subject of lovingly rendered human bodies,
This is Tanya. Her job is to make sure our clients keep up their end of the bargain. She's Eskimo.
the number of naked bodies in this anime could fill an orgy pit. Everyone gets naked here. You know the moments in the Like a Dragon series where if a character gets serious, they'll take their shirt off in one motion to reveal a sick back tat? Crying Freeman takes it one step beyond. If a character gets serious, they won't just take their shirt off, they will strip down to their undies or bare ass. And when I mean everyone gets naked, I mean everyone. The women, the men, Freeman's septuagenarian boss/mentor, and especially Beiya-san, aka the best character in this anime.
Hey, we need a hand!
She is a 10-foot tall, 500-pound, ginormous mass of fat and muscle. 1 minute, a stone-cold killer tearing apart minions like wet bread with her butterfly sword. The next, a sobbing, fragile little flower who wishes nothing more to be a devoted little sister to Freeman. And would you believe that she prefers to go into battle totally naked? Not just because her vast bulk makes her almost bulletproof, but because she likes to use her shapely body to disorient her opponents. This diva.
Time for all of you to fight the big one!
But what I personally enjoy seeing from Crying Freeman animation-wise is something on a metatextual level. Because the production literally began at the end of the Showa era and ended at the start of the Heisei era, you get to see this anime evolve from an 80s OVA to a 90s OVA. This is mostly due to the constant change in animation teams over time. And even if it doesn't look too drastic at first glance, you really do feel the difference. The ones produced in the 80s have a brighter color palette with environments defined by intense deep blues, and then we get to the 90s and the colors get a lot more washed out, a little grungier. And then finally, we get to the final episode, which is practically an R-rated Cowboy Bebop episode. Urban setting, dark shadows everywhere, and some of the most creative storyboarding this series unleashes upon us. Every shot feels ambitious in creating a serious noir piece about a gang war between the Yakuza and the 108 Dragons. It's the part of the anime where it takes itself the most seriously, and that's reflected in how it is shot. From the shootouts, to the assassination montages, to the massive amount of sex scenes, to even the budget shortcuts, including one scene where they deliver an expository conversation via file photos in a case file. It's also telling that this is the only episode where Freeman stays fully clothed in a suit and tie ensemble the entire time. And yet, it still has its share of craziness.
What a rush. Oh, give me a minute, I'll blow my wad right here.
What is probably the most and perhaps only constant throughout Crying Freeman's production was the music. Done by soundtrack composer Hiroaki Yoshino, the music of Crying Freeman is reflective of the type of work it aspires to be. A jazz soundtrack straight out of an American or Hong Kong action movie, equal parts smooth and jamming to both fit the high-stakes skirmishing and the intense melodrama.
Huh? Sit down or you're dead!
Voice acting also fits the overall tone of Crying Freeman, with the Japanese cast treating the story with immense gravitas, allowing them to sell some truly insane plot points. You get good performances from Toshio Furukawa as Freeman, as well as Chiharu Kataishi as Hino, which is good considering their romance turns out to be the heart of the series' drama.
だから非翼連理とは男と女の愛の深さを例えたことわざなんだ。
二つに引き裂けない愛。二つで一つの愛。どちらが死んでも残った方は生きていけないという。
And if you haven't fallen in love with Beiya-san yet, you will once you learn that she's voiced by legendary Joshi wrestling heel Dump Matsumoto.
フリーマン、お前の首をちょん切って、フーチンランの首もちょん切って、二つの首を剥製にして、飾って眺めてこの島で暮らすよ!
But I chose to use the dub for clips because it's honestly not that bad. Streamlined dubs can feel a little rough by today's ears.
You moron! You fell for the oldest trick in the book! God damn it!
But hearing classic dub actors like Barbara Goodson, Edie Merman, and Steve Boulin in their prime is always a treat, even if their readings don't quite sell the tone the anime was going for.
Well, I'm really happy you came. Too bad you're gonna have to die to leave.
What? I don't want to hear about any of that.
But Toei Animation took so long to finish Crying Freeman that when the final installment was complete in '94, Streamline Pictures didn't have the money to license it because they were beginning their descent into slowly going defunct. It wouldn't be until the 2000s when ADV picked up the license and did their own dub of the final episode. But they did bring back the originals like Boulin when they were needed, and he inserts himself so naturally among the ADV regulars.
You're merely fighting the man you said you'd cut down.
Yes, you're right. I'm fighting you, the man that I said I would kill.
Also, across the pond, UK's Manga Entertainment produced their own dub, and like most anime dubs produced over there, it is chock full of future Dark Souls voice actors.
You speak true. However, some people in Hong Kong may be very upset by your activities.
Well, you must be a new arrival. I'm Andre of Astoria. If you require smithing, then speak to me.
Outside of the animation and its historical evolution, the most important quality that Crying Freeman has as an adaptation is that it acts as a showcase for Kazuo Koike and his writing. We get to revel in both his strengths as a writer, as well as his crippling weaknesses.
I'm gonna say this one last time. Take off your goddamn clothes now!
As we see throughout this anime, Koike's big coin advantage is his absolute audacity. We've seen it so many times on this show, and it bears repeating. He's willing to go there, and he takes the big swings.
The bigger the risk, the bigger the reward.
This is what allows an anime like Crying Freeman to never be boring. If time was on my side, I could spend an hour summarizing and listing all the insane bits that happen in this anime. I could talk about how Freeman is able to sneak into Hino's house and remain undetected by pretending to be a painting of himself. I could talk about how the entire plot of one episode is about a woman who becomes the leader of a human trafficking organization staffed by psychotic ex-Green Berets solely because she's been harboring a psychosexual crush on Crying Freeman.
Since the first moment I saw you, I've been your captive, your slave. Night after night, I slept with all your photographs, clutching them to my breasts.
I could talk about how Freeman duels a naked Kapinga-wielding African Amazon named Bugnug, who is the leader of a terrorist cell he's taking down, and she ends up becoming his most loyal ally / side piece after he allows her to drink his blood.
Incredible. He didn't kill me even though he knew he could. Now I have the dragon's blood in me and he let me have it. Eternal life.
I could list so many of the plot points that happen in this anime, and I will right now. And it would probably not cover half of the absurdity that bleeds out of every one of Crying Freeman's orifices. But Koike is also pretty good at piecing these deranged plot beats together into compelling narratives. He did learn the ropes of writing by working on Golgo 13 after all, which contributes to a lot of the more worldly matters of Crying Freeman. If there's an overarching plot of Crying Freeman, it's Freeman expanding the power of the 108 Dragons by taking on multiple international criminal syndicates. A strength of the Golgo 13 series is that Saito would painstakingly research politics and cultures to better suit the plot he was inserting Duke Togo into. Koike does something similar. Knowing cultural differences and the histories between certain groups not only effortlessly sets up a revolving door of baddies for Freeman to beat the mess out of, but also sets up larger conflicts. It turns out that, even if the big boss vouches for him, a lot of the old guard triad aren't going to readily accept taking orders from a Japanese man. They did have that war thing after all.
You're the one who went out of your mind. How could you possibly have put a Japanese at the head of the 108 Dragons? I won't take orders from a Jap.
Shishinya, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot that during the Second World War, the Japanese army massacred every member of your family.
But as much as these are strengths, Koike's audacity and worldliness can be double-edged swords. Double-edged swords that he tends to wield carelessly. For one, while it's not as bad as Wounded Man or Mad Bull, sexual violence against women is still present. It is in fact the fulcrum by which the plot of episode 4 rests on. Also, for as worldly as Koike is, he's not worldly enough to realize that a subplot about a blonde white assassin who disguises herself in full-body blackface is in fact a little iffy. It all comes down to Koike's main quality that is both the greatest strength and weakness he has: the ability to write by the seat of his pants. Looking at the overall structure of each of these volumes, you can see that Koike is clearly making a lot of this stuff up as he goes along. He probably had no master blueprint for how Crying Freeman was going to play out, or if he did, he had to switch up plans multiple times. This results in a lot of the volume stories giving us a big bad that is set up but gets dispatched easily because we learn that there's a bigger bad that needs to be taken care of. And then after all that, we learn that there's a tangentially related loose end that needs to be tied up. So we have to spend the last 15 minutes either with Freeman taking down Blackface Assassin Lady or Hino uncursing a legendary sword because we got some extra time left. This habit of Koike is also what causes the greatest harm to Crying Freeman's narrative. So that little plot summary I did at the beginning, you would expect that the main driving force of Crying Freeman's narrative is Freeman's wish to find a way to free himself from the 108 Dragons' control, or at the very least, lean into the tragedy of a man caught up in a life that he did not ask for. And they keep that premise for exactly one story arc. By the end of the first episode, Freeman has decided to completely relinquish his past, burning down his old home and pottery studio, and declaring his former identity of Yohei Nomura that of a dead man's.
When cornered by the police, Yohei Nomura drowned himself together with his fiancée Emu Hino. No trace of the bodies has been found.
Do you expect us to wipe away your past?
Exactly. You're going to forget everything you ever knew about us. Wipe out everything. Forever.
He has fully embraced his role as the 108 Dragons chief enforcer and soon-to-be leader under his newly christened name Long Tai Yang, and he even has Hino follow him as his newly wedded wife, Fu Qin Lan. And while the shift does have some setup to it in the manga so it doesn't come completely out of nowhere, it definitely is a more rapid change in pace in the anime where the 108 Dragons are established early on as this sinister criminal organization, because unlike the honorable Yakuza, the The 108 Dragons sell drugs!
We know for a fact they intend to take over the Japanese market as soon as possible and expand their drug peddling into our territory. But they miscalculated, because my men don't deal in drugs. Unfortunately for them, if the 108 Dragons want to break into this market, they're going to have to get rid of me.
The 108 Dragons are never shown to be that evil ever again. By the third act of episode 1, they're written way more to be an honorable band of crooks that only get more honorable when Freeman takes over.
We know the Hakuchukai have learned her whereabouts, and you know what they'll do to her. Because she is your woman, it's up to you to save her.
Yes.
So, why this shift? In an interview, Koike said that he was originally going to make another tragic revenge story of a Japanese man trapped in servitude to the Triads against his will. However, it turns out that there was a real Triad organization under the name 108 Dragons based out of Hong Kong. Koike tells us that he was summoned to a luxury hotel by the organization, where they met him with a friendly atmosphere, sat him down to a hearty dinner, and, at the end of the meeting, gifted him a very expensive watch. After that, Koike didn't have the heart to portray the 108 Dragons as villains. Now, Koike could be spinning a yarn here, but let's look at the facts. On one hand, this shift probably did make the comic more successful and prevented Koike from treading old ground like he is wont to do. On the other hand, it made the story shallower. When you name your character Freeman because he longs to be free, having him embrace his prison with open arms robs so much dramatical punch from the story. And let's not forget Koike's own worst excesses letting more air out of the emotional through lines. As I said before, the heart of the series is the romance between Freeman and his newly wedded wife, Hino. So much emphasis is put on them being a couple who cannot live without each other. They are constantly rescuing and supporting each other. The series begins and ends with their romance. Hino's entire character is her being a loyal wife who loves and protects her husband, who becomes proficient in wielding an ancient katana with a terrible curse solely to realize that goal.
It won't cut the stem of the flower because it knows it could go through it and destroy the man I'm in love with.
And it's hard to buy all of that for a second when Freeman is constantly cheating on her either with Bugnug or the Lady of the Week. Made even sillier when the story bends over backwards to find excuses for the reason why Freeman must sleep with beautiful women that are not his wife. Freeman, you must sleep with this beautiful Japanese woman, otherwise this organization is going to use a clone of you to infiltrate the 108 Dragons to establish their cult and kill your wife. Do it for your wife, Freeman. Cheat on her for her sake. You get to cuckold this lady's husband as a bonus. When you get right down to it with Crying Freeman, both the source material and the anime are just pulpy trash. The difference between this and the latest isekai wish fulfillment crap clogging the seasonal Crunchyroll feed are marginal at best. Though, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing for this anime. The source material is trashy escapism that uses violence and nudity as its crutch, just like Wounded Man before it. But the difference here is that Crying Freeman has people who care behind it. This is the difference between vulgar fantasy and vulgar fantasy that is also a true work of art. Crying Freeman is doing what it is designed to do beautifully. To this end, I think this is why there is something more to Crying Freeman than just cheap thrills. Kazuo Koike's writing may have been dime store reading material on its own, but it was Ryoichi Ikegami's gorgeous art that made the story feel like a soaring dramatic crime story. The same logic applies here. Toei Animation, taking full advantage of the bubble economy and their deep talent pool, give us a multi-volume epic of a man who strips naked and kicks people with a knife grip between his toes, all while stoically shedding tears. Anime is a visual medium. The script alone is just the halfway point. With a team of artists and directors, you can turn that script into something more amazing than it ever could have been. Mad Bull 34's direction and animation only makes it rise as far as a cheesy B movie, and Wounded Man's non-existent budget utterly condemns it to the depths of bad anime Hades. Crying Freeman was the lucky one of Koike's, crafted with the blood, sweat, and tears of artists who wanted to make this the best possible version of this story. And considering all that happens in it, that is no small feat. Almost brings a tear to your eye, don't it? Thank you all for watching. If you like this video or want to support this channel, please donate to my Patreon. Each dollar can give you early access to my videos as they come out, as well as keep the channel running a bit more smoothly. You can also subscribe to the channel, ring that bell for notifications, or just like this video. Either way, you'll be helping me out. That's all for now. See you for the next round of tapes.